one thing that we're going to try to do is we're going to try to trade for some wide receivers today. So one of us is buying a player, the other is selling. So let's get into it. Nate, let's start with New Orleans Saints wide receiver Chris Olave.
All right. Well, I'm going to be buying Chris Olave because this is a tunnel target. That's when I'm going to start calling these players who are the obvious number one option on their offense. They're going to get a huge target share. So we got this narrow volume with the Saints. Everything's going to be going towards Chris Olave. Yeah, they got Rashid Shaheed out there. They got A.T. Perry. Juwan Johnson, I still kind of like as a late tight end stash. 138 targets last year with the Saints. So he's up there. He's getting plenty of volume going into his third year. And we talked about this before. The third-year breakout doesn't really exist anymore, at least not as common as it used to be. But a lot of times that third year still is a breakout for some of these players where a guy like Chris Olave, who's hit over 1,000 yards every single season so far through 2 years, he's still going to improve in his third season. And while the raw statistics might not be the big jump that we used to have because players would come into the league and they'd have 400, 500 receiving yards in the rookie year, and that used to be good as a rookie year. Now, if you don't have 1,000, it's like, well, what are you doing out there? So, the jump isn't as big that third year. But I think that third year, we see a lot of these wide receivers really take that next step, have a bit more comfortable route running, technique concepts of how their routes work with other players on the offense. So I'm expecting big things of Chris Olave. He is the main man there with the Saints, and he has a good floor as a fantasy asset. In 2023, he was the wide receiver 19 in points per game with 14.5. His rookie year, he was a wide receiver 25 in points per game with 13.2. So that is more than Drake London has put up so far in his short career. I have to mention him, of course, because one of my ways I'm going to buy Chris Olave is to sell Drake London for Chris Olave. Another option, because, hey, I know we got some Drake London lovers out there. And I like Drake London more than you probably think I do. So another option here, Tank Dell in a second for Chris Olave. What are you thinking here, Mike?
I personally am more interested in Tank Dell in a second. And I would also like to say I like Drake London too. I just don't like Drake London's price. And I think we could be in agreement here. I personally am more interested in Tank Dell in a 25 second. Tank Dell, 15 fantasy points per game. We know he suffered that later season injury. But that being said, we're going to talk about his teammate in a little bit here. So I don't want to get into too much of that. But that is the one that interests me more of those two wide receivers. I think Chris Olave could also be a guy too. If you're looking to cross positions, if you need a running back and you have a wide receiver you want to move, I think Chris Olave is a good player to move in that regard because you're going to be able to get a better running back in return. That obviously means that I'm selling Chris Olave. To me, he's a guy where can I tear down from his value and get a player that's a little bit more consistent? Last year, Tank Dell was wide receiver 39, but as I alluded to, 15 fantasy points per game. Now, on the flip side, Chris Olave, and I just had it up here, he had 14.5 fantasy points per game last year. Pretty close, kind of splitting hairs here. And he was wide receiver 16 on the season, as opposed to Tank Dell's wide receiver 39. But Tank Dell also not playing the full season. But I'm okay with Tank Dell in a 25 second. We could do a virtual handshake on that if you'd like, Nate.
Sounds good.
Let's talk about Nico Collins, Tank Dell's teammate. Nate, I'm going to buy Nico Collins this time. All right.
All right.
The non-existent third-year breakout existed for Nico Collins last year. 80 catches, 1,297 yards, and 8 touchdowns. And you know what? A lot of people are like, oh, Tank Dell's there. That's going to make things worse for him. But I like the fact that the Texans have Tank Dell. They just brought in Stephon Diggs. Dalton Schultz got a contract extension. These are all guys that takes coverage away from Nico Collins. Now, we're not here to debate who the wide receiver one actually is in Houston. That doesn't matter because we know that wide receiver twos can also be beneficial. T. Higgins in the past, Devonta Smith, guys like that, they can be beneficial to your fantasy team. 17.4 fantasy points per game in 2023, Nate. CJ Stroud coming back, obviously, 3.24 yards per route run, Nate, which was second in the NFL. And when he was targeted, CJ Stroud had a quarterback rating of 129.6, which was also second in the NFL. So quarterbacks love stuff like that, man. So I'm all in on Nico Collins. I've been all in on Nico Collins. So for Nico's cost right now, Nate, he's valued around players such as Trey McBride. If you have an abundance of tight ends, you want to move for a stalwart wide receiver. Dak Prescott, these are super flex values as well. And Dalton Kincaid. So there wasn't really any wide receivers that I thought were worth mentioning around his value. Projected mid 25 first is a value as well. And I did see on Fantasy Calc, which is a website that I love to use for trades, I saw a bunch of Olave for Nico Collins trades straight up, which I thought was kind of interesting. But here's a good tear down trade. Maybe you won the championship. And I know a lot of people have been moving off of AJ Brown this offseason. I don't know why. But I think you could do AJ Brown for Nico Collins in a second. You think that's good? Or you think I could get a Nico Collins on a first, Nate?
I'll tell you what, you might be able to get Nico Collins in the first. Depends on who you're asking, especially with Stephon Diggs there. Well, Mike, unfortunately, I have to sell Nico Collins in this situation. I'm buying him everywhere I can in real life, but here I'm playing the seller. And if I can get AJ Brown, I might be willing to sell Nico Collins. So, you got the deal here, Nico Collins and 25 second for AJ Brown. I got Nico. I got a 25 second. I would make this move for AJ Brown.
Yeah.
As much as I love Nico, he does have the target competition right now with CJ Stroud, who obviously had an incredible rookie season last year, but it's still a growing quarterback. Jalen Hurts is pretty established at this point. I like what that offense is. They just signed him to a long-term deal. Also signed Nico Collins to a long-term deal.
Yeah.
So I'm okay making this trade. I am tearing up. It's just costing me a 25 second. I think you could definitely ask for a first. I don't know if I would do the first because of how much I love Nico. But, if we need to do like a first and a second pick swap, I think that might be maybe more fair value in the market. But I'll take you up on the Nico Collins in a second for AJ Brown right now.
So you're saying you would do like AJ Brown in a second for Nico Collins in a first?
I think that's probably
okay.
fair.
Yeah, I think so too. I think you could probably even get away with like AJ Brown, Nico Collins, in like a second and possibly a third that's like 2 years out.
Maybe, or 2 seconds. I think that could also happen.
If the seconds are staggered.
Yep.
Yeah, I think you could do that as well. Let's talk about Cincinnati Bengals wide receiver T. Higgins. Nate, let's start with you. Buying, selling? What are you doing here? And then I'll counter if I need to.
Hey, I'm buying T. Higgins, okay? And the question mark here is, can I get a healthy Higgins? Because in 2021, he played 14 games and was the wide receiver 12 in points per game, Mike. He had 15.7 points that year. In 2022, he played all 17 games, and he was the wide receiver 26 in points per game that year. But last year, without a healthy Burrow, with Jamar Chase also missing time, T. Higgins also missed time, only played in 12 games last year. Did not have a great seasonal finish because of that, but still put up decent numbers and was playing with Jake Browning, who did pretty well in his own right. But I really like T. Higgins still. I think, you look at his body of work through his 4 years so far, while he hasn't been the Justin Jefferson or the Jamar Chase yet, he has been very productive. He has, 24 touchdowns so far over 4 years. He's always been able to find the end zone. He's 6'4", over 200 pounds. He's got that big body to him. He's a very good wide receiver. And any other team, as the wide receiver one, we'd be talking about this guy, I think, having top 12 upside easily. Yeah. And while he is franchise tagged, he hasn't signed it yet. He has not showed up to the OTAs yet. And he's not getting fined because it's the franchise tag. I don't know if he's going to be traded this year. I doubt it. But if he is traded this year, or if he isn't traded, he finds a new team next year. I don't think he's going to be on the Bengals again next year on another franchise tag. So at some point, T. Higgins is going to be the wide receiver one, most likely on a team. There's a chance he goes somewhere where they also have another wide receiver. But I think T. Higgins, at his floor, is still a really good wide receiver. And with his value now dropping much closer to the end of the top 25 than where it used to be, where he was in the middle or the top, I think he's more accessible at this point. I would move a 25 first for T. Higgins. I'm seeing T. Higgins be moved for late first round picks this year, like the 109, the 110, 111. I like Brian Thomas and Ladd McConkey, but having T. Higgins, you already know what you're getting. I mean, I'm hoping Brian Thomas is T. Higgins most likely. There's a chance he could do better than that, but I think if Brian Thomas was T. Higgins, a lot of us would be pretty happy with our late first round pick. So can you go ahead and get T. Higgins, add him to your team? If you don't want to move a first round pick, as much as I love Josh Downs, I'd like to move Josh Downs in the second round pick for T. Higgins.
Admittedly, I'd probably be more interested if it's 25 first. Personally, I'm not interested in either of these trades. Not super excited about Josh Downs, a guy who's going to be the number 2 option. On a Colts offense, which I think could be run heavy, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. And if I'm moving a player like T. Higgins, I want something that's going to benefit me right now. So I would probably try to work for a younger up and coming guy like Zay Flowers, Rashee Rice, even a Jordan Addison, Devonta Smith, not up and coming. He's obviously more established. I don't think there's any possibility you turn T. Higgins into Justin Jefferson at all. But T. Higgins, to me, I think he's a good starting point if you wanted to trade for a player like Drake London. I think T. Higgins is a good starting point too.
Yeah.
And there is a possibility where Drake London has a better season than T. Higgins does.
I think that's well within the realm of possibilities.
Because he's the number 1 wide receiving target for the Falcons. They're going to have Kirk Cousins coming in.
Yep.
Hopefully he gets in there. Yeah, so that's a guy. Like, how would we go from T. Higgins to Drake London? That's not a straight up swap, right?
No, you probably have to add something to T. Higgins. People probably ask for a first. If you're going to move Drake London, but I think that would be too expensive for me. For me, I'm thinking T. Higgins a second for Drake London. I mean, it probably needs to be like an early second.
In that case, I might even look for, can I go from T. Higgins to like Jaden Reed?
I think that could be a swap. I don't think you have to add anything to that.
I would do. You want to shake hands on Jaden Reed for T. Higgins?
I'll give you Jaden Reed for T. Higgins, sure.
All right, there we go. Beautiful.
I can go either way there, just for the people who are taking my advice. I can go either way there.
I like both players. Yeah, and I could see, like, if you said T. Higgins has a better season than Jaden Reed, I'd say, okay. And if you said to me, Jaden Reed's going to have a better season than T. Higgins, I could see that being a possibility as well. Let's go to Seattle. Let's talk about Seattle Seahawks wide receiver DK Metcalf. I'm going to buy. Pretty consistent. Only 2 of his 5 seasons were under 1,000 yards. One of those was his rookie season, so he gets a little bit of a pass. And in 2021, but to compensate for it in 2021, Nate, he did have double-digit touchdowns. He had 12. He was wide receiver 2 last year, and he was wide receiver 21. For those of you asking, he did average 14.1 fantasy points per game in a full PPR format. He's got a healthy Geno Smith coming back, or Sam Howell, because there was, hey, you can snicker all you want. There was a point in time where Sam Howell was quarterback 3 on the season, Nate.
That's fine, but he wasn't quarterback 3 on the NFL season.
He was not. But we play in the fantasy season, and that's what matters. I think either one of these guys, they can give him the option to have wide receiver 1 weeks upside. I'm not saying he'll finish as a wide receiver 1, but he definitely will have wide receiver 1 weeks sprinkled in here and there.
I think Metcalf is probably underrated because he's been really consistent, honestly.
Yeah.
Still only, I think, 26 years old. I love Metcalf. I think he's a really good player.
He's a good buy right now, and he's valued around players such as Zay Flowers, DJ Moore, Tank Dell. I can see this is another situation where this goes either way. DK can have better numbers than all those guys, and all those guys have an opportunity to have a better season than him as well.
Mm-hmm.
But here's a trade I put together. Would you do Deebo Samuel for DK Metcalf in a second? Or maybe it might have to be a third, possibly.
I would not, Mike. I'm not a big Deebo Samuel fan. I'm a pretty decent DK Metcalf fan, especially in this new offense, which is the Washington Huskies offense that we saw this past year do so well in college. And we have DK Metcalf taking on the Roma Dunze role. I really like the sound of that. So if we were doing this deal around Deebo and Metcalf, I would actually be asking for the pick on top of Deebo to go get Metcalf. I know Deebo has scored actually pretty well. But there's a lot of mouths to feed with the 49ers. I've never been a big Deebo fan. I'm worried about his injuries as well. So, for me, I have Metcalf over Deebo. You can actually check my wide receiver rankings in the recent video we did. Bob's definitely going to drop it right here. It's probably in the YouTube description, but it might be like right here. Who knows?
He likes doing that, by the way.
He loves doing that. But I do have my wide receiver ranks. They dropped just about a week ago, 2 weeks ago. I also have my running back ranks that just dropped yesterday, Mike. So if you want to check out my rankings, you can go on the YouTube, check it out. You can go on to our Patreon, get to our Notion, get to our Discord. We do have that available there as well.
So the important thing is when you're trading with your league mates, you have to know your league mate well.
Yeah.
How do we do something for Deontay Johnson for DK Metcalf, Nate? How do we make that work?
Yeah, this is where we go back to maybe the first and second pick swap. Do I get Deontay Johnson in a first for DK Metcalf in a second? How do you feel about that, Michael?
You know what? I'll shake on that one, and it could come back to bite me. But I'm a pretty big believer in DK Metcalf this season, and I'm gonna go ahead. I'm gonna put my money where my mouth is right now. And Nate, you're selling. Do you have anything to add to why you would sell, other than because you have to?
I have to, but also JSN's, his rise is imminent. I don't know if he's going to end up being the wide receiver 1 there. Maybe it might be more of a shared situation between him and DK. Maybe Tyler Lockett continues to play into that equation. But also you have the question mark about Geno Smith. Is Geno Smith the guy? I don't think that Sam Howell is going to be great for DK Metcalf if he's the guy. And then if neither one of those guys is the quarterback of the future for the Seahawks, it might be a little rough for DK Metcalf over the next 2 years. And then in 2 years, in 2026, he does hit free agency, about 28 years old. So he'll be in his prime, able to choose where he goes. So even if we do have some shortcomings with the Seattle Seahawks offense, I think the long-term play with DK Metcalf is still pretty strong.
Fair enough. We got our deal done. Let's move now to a stadium nestled between three rivers, and let's talk about Pittsburgh Steelers wide receiver George Pickens.
Yeah, I'm buying George Pickens here. I've actually kind of come around on George Pickens. In this scenario, I probably would rather sell than buy, but I've come around where I'm willing to buy some George Pickens because, look, another tunnel target. Who we got here? We got Roman Wilson, who was just picked up in the 3rd round. I don't think he's going to be a significant threat to George Pickens. And outside of that, I'll be honest, I don't even really know who they have. I mean, I know they got Calvin Austin there, but he's about 5'6" and fast. They probably got some other names there that would ring a bell, but none that stand out. Does it really matter? It's the Arthur Smith offense now. We saw what that was like in the Falcons. Drake London, he was the target hog. We're going to see that again with George Pickens. The best receiving weapon in that offense outside of Pickens is Pat Freiermuth. And I think he'll do well. But George Pickens is going to get the majority of the targets here. He saw 106 targets last year. I don't know if that number is really going to go up too far just because of the offense. I expect this team to run. There's going to be a lot of run game. The pass game will be there, and it will be there for Pickens. But there's not going to be a high volume, I don't think, even though he has a high target share. I think this is going to be a run-based team with Russell Wilson and or Justin Fields running a lot of play action. That could help Pickens out as maybe they target him deep a lot. He did really well on deep targets last year, was top 10 in deep targets last year. So his average depth of target, his yards per catch have all been pretty high. It gives him the ability to win down the field. He's got the speed. He's got the size. So I like George Pickens. He fits well as a wide receiver 1 for this offense. Can you buy him for a late 25 first? That's my question.
Yeah, I'd probably sell Pickens for that. But I'm just looking at I would sell him for that. I mean, I would love to get something back for now, but if I'm selling him for that, I'm going to assume that my team is not competing. But looking at the Pittsburgh Steelers depth chart, it looks like they have to rebuild the team, and all they have is rookie 3rd and 4th round picks. Their wide receiver room is George Pickens, Roman Wilson, and look the F out. Here comes Van Jefferson as your
that's right.
wide receiver. Calvin Austin, Scotty Miller, Quez Watkins. But for the late 25 first, I will gladly do that deal. Okay, let's talk about another wide receiver here, and this is Kansas City Chiefs wide receiver Rashee Rice. I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to buy. He's building off an impressive rookie season with Patrick Mahomes, 79 for 938 and 7. And you know what? I know everyone says that Travis Kelce is the receiver one there, but his stat line was pretty close to Travis Kelce's stat line last year. I'll reiterate, Rashee's again was 79 receptions, 938 yards, and 7 touchdowns. Travis Kelce, 93 receptions, which is insane, 984 yards, and 5 touchdowns. Obviously, more receptions, more yards, less touchdowns, though. So maybe this is a big red zone guy. And hey, check it out. Quarterbacks love this. The quarterback QBR per target was 123.7, which was 5th in the NFL. Very good as well. So Mahomes is going to like that. And he did average 13.3 fantasy points per game in 23 on his way to a wide receiver 27 finish. But the sky's the limit for Rashee Rice. I know he had some off the field issues this offseason. We're not here to talk about that. I'm purely here to talk about what he did on field. He's valued around players such as Devontae Adams, who's an aging asset, Baker Mayfield, we like, Michael Penix Jr. Tell me what you think about this, if you want to do a quote-unquote tear down. Devonta Smith for Rashee Rice and a 3rd round pick in 2025. What do you think about that, Nate?
I would do that deal. I'll take Devonta Smith, move Rashee Rice in the 3rd. And look, there's red flags everywhere. There's all these off-the-field issues that have popped up. I get it. If you want to move off Rashee Rice, you can still do it. His value is starting to come back. I heard a good report that he was dominant today at the Chiefs OTA camp. So, the off-the-field stuff is definitely there. But as we get closer to the season, as long as he can keep his name out of the headlines continuously until then, his value should start to creep back up. You can already see it creeping back up on Keep Trade Cut. I don't mind holding on to him. If I'm selling him, I'm happy to pick up Devonta Smith. Some players I want to bring up as well. Rachaad White, Jaden Reed, DeAndre Swift, Christian Kirk. You might be able to get like a 3rd round pick on some of those guys. Maybe it might just be a swap. But as Rashee Rice's value continues to go up, we get closer to the season, I would definitely be willing to make a move if I can get a guy like Devonta Smith or maybe a little bit safer wide receiver.
Let's talk about Indianapolis Colts wide receiver Josh Downs. So Nate, what are you doing here? It looks like we might actually end up doing the same thing.
Well, I'm buying here. I'm actually selling Josh Downs, unfortunately, and I have a ton of him. So unfortunately, I actually am selling him. But if I was buying him, I think there's plenty to be happy about with Josh Downs. He's a very good receiver. I don't think Adonai Mitchell is going to come in and take over the wide receiver 2 position. All reports out of camp so far have been that Josh Downs has been incredible, and that if Michael Pittman Jr. was to miss any time, that he would easily step into that wide receiver 1 position. Anthony Richardson loves finding him over the middle of the field. When plays break down, Josh Downs is great at getting open. He's very, very talented, and playing that slot position, he's going to do very well. The problem is for fantasy football, is he going to have the volume that we need him to have to be a top 24 wide receiver when Michael Pittman Jr. is playing across from him? I don't know about that. We need Anthony Richardson to hit his 95th plus percentile outcome for, I think, Josh Downs to be a top 24 wide receiver. So I'm actually looking to sell him right now. Like, I think we're doing the same thing here. You're looking to sell too, right?
Yeah, we are. And my concern as well is volume. I just don't see AD Mitchell overtaking his, his pass catching role from Downs. But then there's going to be a tight end that's going to get targets. Is it Jelani Woods? Is it Kylan Granson? Is it Mo Alley Cox? Is it my boy Will Mallory? Doubtful. But yeah, I'm just concerned about the volume as well. So I think you can cash in right now on Josh Downs. So what are you moving him for again, Nate?
I'd move him for an early second this year if we can make that happen. I don't think you can get a first for him next year.
I don't think you could either.
And I don't want to move him for a straight up second next year either. I want like an early second this year if I'm going to move him. Otherwise, I might as well hold on to him because, like I said, I think Josh Downs is a very good player. I just think the situation kind of sets a ceiling for him that is lower than we'd want in fantasy football. So if I can get an early second for him, I'd be looking to do that. Maybe I can make a move over to Jaden Reed, maybe some of the other guys we've talked about already. If I can make a lateral move for Josh Downs, I'd be willing to do that because I think there might be a path for another player to have more opportunity.
Josh Downs to Jaden Reed, I would do that. I would even consider Josh Downs for like Dontavian Wicks plus if you want to stay in the Green Bay offense.
Sure. Yeah. You get like can you get a second on top? I feel really good about Dontavian Wicks in a second.
I feel good about that, but I don't think so. If you think about it, if Josh Downs' value is a straight up second, I don't think you could do that plus an ascending talent as well. That's going to wrap it up for us tonight. Thank you, everybody, for listening or watching if you were on YouTube. So make sure you check out our Patreon, patreon.com/Dynasty Rewind. Hang out in there for a week for free. The link is down below. Until next time, everybody, for Nate, I'm Mike. We'll see you later.